Hello, this is Mother Love Whispers. I'm sorry it's been a while since I've got on here, but I hope that the stories that I found to read are something that'll be a blessing. Let me get situated a little bit here. The first one is called Summer Faith, and it's from this book. It's the Chicken Soup for the Soul, a book of miracles, which, Lord knows, we all need miracles. So, this is summer faith. But Jesus called the children to him and said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." Luke 18:16. It was one of those dreary, cold, rainy days in February that Portland, Oregon is famous for, and my mood was as miserable as the weather. Some people like rain. I'm not one of those people. I'd already gotten drenched once that day, taking my 3-year-old daughter, Summer, to her Christian preschool. So the last thing I wanted to do was to go out in it again. But it was 2 o'clock, and she needed to be picked up by 2:30. The traffic was terrible. When I finally pulled into the school parking lot, it was 2:45. I knew Summer's teacher was not going to be happy. I parked the car, pulled my coat collar tight, and buttoned it, then reached for my umbrella, which wasn't under the front seat where it should have been. Someone, it couldn't have been me, of course, had left it in the garage that morning. I muttered a couple of words that likely made my guardian angel cringe and hurried through the lake forming on the concrete. Inside, Teacher Jennifer lifted an eyebrow at me, obviously annoyed with my tardiness, and pointed down the hallway. Summer was bent over a table, working to finish a painting. "Hi, Mommy," she chirped. "Come on, honey," I called. "We're late. Teacher Jennifer wants to go home." She held up her artwork. "Look, I drawed it for you." I took the paper and squinted impatiently at it. "Uh-huh, good." I nodded and handed her coat to her. She put the picture down and folded her arms. She wasn't going anywhere until I apologized, and it better be believable. "It's wonderful," I gushed. "Best one you ever did." She finally nodded and obediently held out her arms for her jacket. Outside, the rain was now a freezing, nearly sideways sheet. Both of us were soaked by the time we got to the car. "It's raining," Summer observed from her car seat behind me. "No kidding," I said, drying my dripping hair with a handful of Kleenex before starting the car. I was just pulling out when Summer yelled, "Wait, we gotta go back." I slammed on the brakes and turned around. "What are you talking about? Go back outside? Why?" "My Care Bear's mitten," she cried, waving a lonely right-hand Care Bear at me. "My mitten's gone. I must have left it in school." "Oh, for heavens." "Wait a minute," I muttered, backing the car to the curb. Parking, I turned around to lean over the seat and undo her seatbelt. "Okay, look in your pockets." "I did," she wailed. "It's not there." She turned both pockets inside out to demonstrate their mittenlessness to me. "Get up," I sighed. "Maybe you're sitting on it." She climbed out. No mitten. We checked around and under the seat and on the floorboards. No mitten. "See," Summer cried. "We have to go back." "No, maybe it's outside, next to the curb." I opened the door and stuck my head out. Niagara Falls poured over what was left of my hairstyle. No mitten. "That's it," I pronounced with finality. "You have 3 pairs of mittens at home, for crying out loud. Now get back in your seat so I can buckle you in. I want my bestest Care Bear mitten. Well, I want a week in Jamaica. Thinking on that kept her quiet for a moment or two, allowing me to get the car headed for home. But 5 minutes later, I want my mitten. Looking at her distressed face in the rearview mirror, I said, "You made that perfectly clear. Now give it a rest, please." Eyes narrowed, frown lines deep. She muttered something threatening under her breath. "What did you say?" "I say," she pouted, "I asked Jesus. Jesus will get my mitten." Rolling my eyes, I said, "Jesus is not going to get your mitten. He's busy with more important things." "He will too," she stated firmly. Once we finally got home and parked in the garage, we went into the house. I told Summer, "I've got a lot to do before I get dinner ready. Go play in your room, honey." I hung up our coats in the laundry room and headed to the kitchen to deal with the dishes in the sink when I remembered the mail had to be brought in from outside in the rain. Groaning, I put my coat back on and stomped down the hallway to the front door. Summer followed on my heels. Opening the door, I looked hopefully up through the rain for any sign of blue sky. A clap of thunder echoed in the distance. "Oh, hush up," I muttered, and prepared to sprint to the mailbox. Before I could take a step, though, Summer squealed. "What now?" I groaned, spinning around. "I told you." "Told me what?" She pointed out the door, grinning. I turned and followed her finger with my eyes, looked down at the doorstep. There, on the welcome mat, was a Care Bear mitten, a left-handed Care Bear mitten. I blinked in disbelief, my mind scrambling to make sense of what I was seeing. What? How? My common sense tried to reason that she must have dropped it on her way out this morning, but no, we hadn't been anywhere near the front porch. We'd gone out through the garage. In fact, she and I had not been out the front door in more than a week. Stunned, I turned to look into Summer's shining face. "I told you Jesus would get it for me," she beamed. Gathering her into my arms, I whispered, "Yes, you did, little girl. You really did." Holding her tightly, I was overwhelmed with awe at our God who would perform such a miracle for a little child simply because she stood steadfast in her faith. After a minute, Summer pulled away to say, "Thank you, Jesus." Then she picked up her mitten and skipped off to her room. I looked up to heaven and whispered, "Amen to that, Lord." That lady's name was Tina Wagner Mattern. Sweet little story. And it really does happen that way. That, when you're meek and you just don't even question the fact that He does listen. He does listen to everything. Kelly, my daughter, Southern Belle Whisper, she had a sweet little rabbit, and it got loose one morning from its cage out and back, and we were going to church, and I told her we would check on it when we got back, but I didn't give it much chance of surviving because we lived in Virginia, and we were right next to the woods where our house was, and just didn't look to be able to get it. But anyway, we got to church, and there was they asked for requests, prayer requests, and people were asking for family members and to be healed of this and that. And she raised her hand and asked if people would pray that we would be able to find her rabbit when we got home. And, it was kind of funny how people kind of shook their head, that it was sweet of a little girl to have that kind of faith. And so they added that with our prayers. And sure enough, when we got home, somehow, whether he had hopped over into the next lawn or what, but the fellow that we lived next door to had found him and put him back in her cage. And we were just tickled to death to find him. He was a beautiful rabbit, beautiful markings, and he stayed a good pet for a long time. But that is how God does things. You have to have faith. It's hard. It's hard a lot of times. And I know a lot of people are going through so much. It's, it's almost hard to imagine the depth of despair that a lot of people are in. And, I'm sure that a lot of you have been. But just to be able to, sometimes you're saying, help me, Lord, or I have faith, Lord, when it's hard for you to even mouth the words. But once they're said, there's peace. There's a feeling of peace. And it's amazing. It truly is amazing. Okay, this one is called Remember to Pray and Ask and You Will Receive and Your Joy Will Be Complete. And that's from John 16:24. It was a beautiful Thanksgiving day with bright blue skies and unseasonably warm weather. Instead of enjoying a turkey meal with family, though, we were moving for the second time in a year. The previous year, we had rented a house while waiting for the farmhouse we bought to be vacated and remodeled. Finally, the remodeling was finished, and we were moving into our home. For several years, we had searched for just the right piece of land in the country. As soon as we saw this slice of heaven on earth, we knew our search was over. With more than 50 acres, it consisted of a little of everything we'd hoped for. A peaceful, rambling brook divided the lush golden meadow from the dense forest. Tucked inside the forest were lots of winding deer paths and even a spring on the side of a hill that flowed into a quaint trickling waterfall. Thousands of sweet-smelling pine trees dotted several soft, rolling hills. My husband's favorite part was the stocked pond, just a few yards from the back door of the house, a fisherman's dream come true. As I lugged yet another box from the bed of the pickup truck, I paused to scan the peaceful serenity of the surroundings. It was easy to feel God's presence here. Birds were in constant celebration from sunup to sundown, and graceful white-tailed deer would stop for a moment to stare at us, flick their fluffy tails, and bound away. I stood mesmerized by the bright sun glistening on the pond, its soft lull instantly relaxing me. Gazing at the water, I recalled a conversation from just a few days before. My husband Chuck and I were strolling the perimeter of the pond with the previous owner Eric, when Eric nonchalantly mentioned, "You need to set some traps for muskrats. They're tearing apart the dam on your pond." Chuck and I looked at each other and gulped. Great, I thought. Add that to the list of things to do. Still daydreaming, I heard Chuck speaking to me, snapping me back to the present. "You know," he said in a voice more tired than usual, "we still need to get our washer and dryer out of storage." Then he added with a heavy sigh, "I hope they'll both work." The washer and dryer were the last items to move. We'd purchased them 20 years earlier when we were first married, and now that we'd overspent our budget remodeling, we hoped they'd last a little longer. Later that day, we wrestled the washer and dryer into the basement and got them leveled. I held my breath when Chuck plugged them in, then turned them on. The gentle purring of the motors was thrilling, yet short-lived. We watched in despair as a puddle of water formed under the washer. Then we noticed the air in the dryer wasn't getting warm. "No problem," I said, trying to be optimistic. "I'll call my brother Danny. He'll know what to do." Danny was an appliance repairman, and one of the best, so it shouldn't have surprised me when his wife answered and said his schedule was full. It would be weeks before it could come out. My heart sank again. Exhausted, I plopped down at the kitchen table and kept my face in my hands. First muskrats, now appliances. What next? I sobbed. I didn't even know what a muskrat looked like, much less how to get rid of one, and where would we get the money to replace the old washer and dryer? Suddenly, an image of a special 5-year-old Sunday school student, Tiffany, came to my mind. One Sunday morning, while teaching her kindergarten class, I realized to my horror that I'd left the lesson, including crafts, at home. I began to panic, wringing my hands and murmuring out loud about my predicament. Tiffany had promptly marched up to me, tugged at my dress, and matter-of-factly reminded me, "Just pray about it, teacher. God knows how to fix it." Thanks. That's it. Prayer. The very message that I had been trying to impress upon these young minds was now a good message for me. I bowed my head and thanked God for all that He had done for us and for the beauty of the earth. I also asked Him to please help us get our washer and dryer fixed and show us how to deal with those pesky muskrats. I was instantly filled with peace, so much so that later that evening, when my husband mentioned shopping for a washer and dryer soon, my answer surprised him. "I don't have a sense of urgency about this." I wouldn't explain it, but I knew it would be taken care of. The next day, however, when the phone rang, nothing could have prepared me for what transpired. The caller was a man named Phil, a friend and co-worker of Danny's. "Connie," he began a little sheepishly, "I just finished talking to your brother. I called him to get your number, and he told me about your old washer and dryer. Well, I thought maybe we could work something out." I was momentarily speechless, thrilled at the prospect of getting the appliances fixed. "Well, sure," I spoke at last. "What did you have in mind?" "Well, sure," I said. "What did you have in mind?" "You see," Phil went on hesitantly, "my teenage son likes to trap." "Great," I anxiously interrupted. "He can trap in the forest. No problem." "That's not what I had in mind," Phil continued. "I heard you have a pond, and, well, if you and Chuck let my son trap muskrats on your pond, I'll fix your washer and dryer." Chills ran up and down my spine as I recalled, a precious little girl tucking at my skirt. Yes, Tiffany, God does know how to fix it. And that's by Connie Sturm Cameron. Sweet. Yeah, a child's faith. It'll put you to shame, it sure will. Oh, that reminds me. I had the same thing happen in a way. And I'm sorry I got a little bit out of breath and all that toward the end here. But I had taught my son, he was about 2, I guess. I had told him that later on in life when he was going to school and that sort of thing, that if he ever got scared, that there was I told him about Jesus. I told him that all he had to do was just say in his mind or just whisper and say, Jesus, help me not be afraid. And I said, it helps you. And if there's something that you're concerned about, then you can talk to Jesus about it. And I didn't realize how much he took that to heart until we were grocery shopping later that week. And I'd put him in the little cart and a little seat in there, and so he's facing me, and we're going along, and there was some bread that had the raisins and icing on it, and I only had enough money with me to get like our, meager little bit of groceries. And he asked me, he said, can we have that type of bread? And I said, honey, no, not this time. We'll get it next time. But let me just finish, and we'll talk about it later. Well, the next thing I knew, here he puts his little hands together and went to praying out loud in front of everybody. The other customers actually stared at me because he was saying, oh, please, Jesus, make Mommy buy this bread for me. He made it sound like I didn't want to get him anything to eat or, whatnot. But anyway, but it was precious. He did. He took it hard, and he was doing his best to get what he wanted out of it. But thankfully, it all worked out. And it was funny for later on, telling his grandma and them. Well, I love you all, and I pray that you're having a good week. And I'm sorry it's been so long since I made a video, and I promise to do more because I do miss you all, and I pray that everybody's doing well. And I'll talk to you later. Toodaloo.